In the rich spiritual heritage of African traditional religions, one truth stands out with profound clarity: to honor the ancestors is to honor yourself. This idea, passed down through generations in whispered prayers, sacred rituals, and family stories, is not merely a poetic saying but a spiritual principle that shapes the way millions view life, death, and identity. In many African cultures, the ancestors are not seen as departed souls consigned to some unreachable realm. Instead, they are present, alive in spirit, and deeply involved in the lives of their descendants. They are remembered not just on ceremonial days, but in daily life, in decisions, in dreams, in the naming of children, and in the quiet moments when one reflects on who they are and where they come from. To the African mind shaped by traditional belief systems, a person is never an isolated individual. One is a link in an unbroken chain stretching back through generations, a living thread in the fabric of family and community. Life is not seen as beginning at birth or ending at death, but as a continuum. The living, the dead, and the unborn coexist within a sacred cycle of existence. In this worldview, to forget or neglect the ancestors is to sever oneself from the very source of one's being, culturally, spiritually, and morally. It is to drift rootless in the world, vulnerable to spiritual confusion and emotional dislocation. This is why honoring the ancestors is more than an act of respect, it is a declaration of identity. It is a spiritual affirmation that says, I know who I am because I know who I come from. In African cosmology, identity is not simply personal, it is ancestral. Names often reflect lineage. Rituals recall family history, and blessings invoke the protection of forebears. The ancestors are not only family members who have died, they are the moral and spiritual foundation upon which lives are built. They are remembered not for nostalgia, but for guidance and blessing. This principle, honoring the ancestors as a form of honoring oneself, has deep psychological and social implications. In a world increasingly marked by displacement, diaspora, and digital disconnection, many people find themselves yearning for a sense of belonging. They look for meaning in self-help books, social media identities, or temporary communities. But African traditional religions teach that the truest sense of belonging starts with acknowledging one's roots. Before we are anything else, we are descendants. When we pour libation, light a candle, or whisper a name from the past, we are not practicing superstition, we are reaching across time to affirm our place in the world. To honor the ancestors is also to accept responsibility. It means recognizing that we carry within us not only the gifts but also the unfinished hopes, the unresolved traumas, and the sacred obligations of those who came before us. The ancestors are not passive observers, they are spiritual stakeholders in our actions. Their approval or disapproval is not symbolic. It is real and felt. When life goes wrong, when illness, misfortune, or restlessness strikes, many turn to the ancestors for answers. And when things go right, when blessings flow, when children thrive, when peace reigns, it is understood that the ancestors have smiled upon the living. In this way, the ancestors are not worshipped as gods, but venerated as elder spirits. They do not replace the Creator in African theology but serve as intermediaries and protectors. They are close enough to understand human struggles, and wise enough to guide the living toward harmony. Rituals to honor them may involve offerings of food or drink, storytelling, drumming, or prayer. These acts are not empty traditions, they are sacred moments of reconnection. The essence of this lesson, that honoring the ancestors is to honor your roots, is a call to self-awareness. It urges us to move beyond the illusion of separateness and return to the wisdom of continuity. It invites us to listen not just to our own voice, but to the voice of the ancestors speaking through intuition, through nature, through the very structure of our lives. And it challenges us to live in such a way that we, too, may one day become worthy ancestors, remembered not just in name, but in spirit. In this lecture, we will journey through the depths of this teaching. We will explore who the ancestors are in African traditional religion, how they are honored, what roles they play in the lives of the living, and how forgetting or dishonoring them can affect one's spiritual balance. We will also reflect on the relevance of these ancestral values in our modern, globalized world, where many have lost touch with their lineage, their rituals, and their spiritual anchors. Ultimately, this is not just a conversation about the past. It is a call to reclaim something essential, our roots, our identity, and our place in the sacred circle of life. Let us begin. In African traditional religions, not everyone who dies is automatically considered an ancestor. The word ancestor carries a sacred weight. It refers not just to biological predecessors, but to spiritually elevated members of a family or community who, in life, embodied wisdom, virtue, responsibility, and connection to the sacred order. These are individuals who lived honorably, upheld moral codes, fulfilled social duties, and died a good death, meaning they passed away at an appropriate age, under peaceful circumstances, with the blessings of family and the community. Only such individuals are recognized as true ancestors, and are believed to continue playing an active role in the spiritual and moral life of the living. This distinction between the merely deceased and the ancestral spirit is crucial. A person who lived selfishly, betrayed their community, or died tragically or violently may not automatically be elevated to the status of ancestor. In some traditions, such spirits are believed to become restless, wandering, or even dangerous to the living until proper rituals are performed to guide them or bring closure. Therefore, the status of being an ancestor is not simply inherited, it is earned. The ancestors, in this sense, are both remembered and revered because of the lives they lived and the energy they left behind. Their spirits are believed to dwell in a parallel dimension often referred to as the spirit world, a place not disconnected from the material world but layered upon it. The ancestors exist in what John Biddy, a renowned African scholar, called the realm of the living dead. This term does not imply zombies or ghost stories, but rather refers to those who, though physically dead, continue to live on in the memories, names, and spiritual awareness of their descendants. They are not dead in the Western sense of total cessation. They are living dead, alive in a different form, still participating in the affairs of the living. In African cosmology, the line between the spiritual and the physical is not rigid but fluid. Communication flows between these realms through ritual, dreams, divination, and intuition. The ancestors, having crossed into this spiritual dimension, are believed to possess a higher awareness and deeper insight. They are closer to the divine, yet remain intimately connected to their human lineage. Because of this, they serve as mediators, acting as intercessors between the human world and the world of spirits and deities. When people pray or make offerings to ancestors, they are not praying to them in the sense of deity worship, but rather through them, asking them to carry petitions, give protection, or provide wisdom. These spiritual figures are not abstract entities. They are specific individuals, often named and remembered in oral traditions, family songs, and ritual language. In many communities, ancestral names are recycled through generations to maintain connection and continuity. A child may be named after a grandmother who was known for her strength and wisdom, or a grandfather who was a healer or clan leader. In this way, the presence of ancestors is embedded in the very identity of the living, creating a loop of spiritual memory that ensures no one is ever truly gone. Furthermore, ancestors are believed to have a vested interest in the well-being of their descendants. They protect the family, guide major decisions, and send warnings when danger is near. Dreams and signs are often interpreted as messages from these spirits, and their approval is sought in matters such as marriage, childbirth, career, and migration. A failure to consult or honor the ancestors is not just seen as disrespect, it is spiritually risky. It is like building a house without a foundation, or sailing without a compass. In communal life, certain ancestors become symbols not only for a family but for an entire clan, village, or ethnic group. These are the legendary forefathers and foremothers, warriors, prophets, kings, or healers, whose lives have become pillars of identity. Shrines may be dedicated to them, and their deeds remembered in public festivals. For example, in Yoruba religion, ancestors are known as Igungun, and elaborate masquerade ceremonies are performed in their honor. In these rituals, the ancestral spirits are believed to possess the dancers, allowing the community to interact with the spiritual realm in direct, powerful ways. Yet even in households without elaborate shrines or public ceremonies, the presence of ancestors is deeply felt. A simple act such as placing a glass of water on a windowsill, lighting a candle at dusk, or silently speaking the name of a departed loved one is a form of ancestral veneration. These gestures, however small, serve as bridges between the seen and the unseen, the living and the living dead. In many African traditions, there is a belief that the ancestors continue to evolve in the spirit world. Their journey does not end at death. It continues in a realm where they may grow in power, insight, and influence. As their descendants honor them, remember them, and live in accordance with the values they upheld, the ancestors are spiritually elevated. In return, they bless the lineage with prosperity, fertility, guidance, and peace. To know who the ancestors are is to understand the very foundation of African spirituality. They are not just figures of the past, they are ongoing presences in the lives of the living. They remind us that we are never alone, that our lives are the continuation of a story much older and larger than ourselves. They urge us to live in such a way that we too, when our time comes, may be remembered not with fear or shame, but with honor and love. For in African traditional religion, the greatest aspiration is not just to live well, but to be worthy of joining the ancestral ranks, and in so doing, to become part of the eternal chain of guardians watching over those yet to be born. In African traditional religions, the ancestors are not merely passive figures remembered in rituals, they are active spiritual agents involved in the ongoing lives of their descendants. Their role extends beyond memory into the sacred realm of guidance, protection, intercession, and correction. They are the unseen hands behind blessings, the whispering voices in dreams, and the spiritual backbone of family and community life. Far from being silent or removed, the ancestors are regarded as vigilant watchers, caring, advising, and at times, warning those they left behind. To live with the awareness of ancestral presence is to walk with invisible wisdom at your side. At the core of their spiritual role is the belief that ancestors are intermediaries between the human world and the divine. While the Supreme Being, known by different names such as Olodumare, Nyam, or Matamo, is often considered too distant or transcendent to approach directly, the ancestors serve as personal bridges. They know the struggles of earthly life, having once walked it themselves, and they possess the spiritual clarity of those who have passed into the next realm. Their experience grants them a unique perspective, one that allows them to intercede effectively on behalf of the living. When people pour libations or offer prayers, they are not asking the ancestors for supernatural miracles, but for favor, wisdom, and alignment with cosmic harmony. These spiritual elders are especially known for their role as protectors. They are believed to guard homes, fields, children, and even entire communities from harm. A farmer who blesses his land before planting may invoke the names of ancestral spirits to ensure a fruitful harvest. A mother worried about a sick child may whisper a plea to her grandmother's spirit for healing. A traveler might call on the ancestors for safe passage before beginning a journey. In all these acts, the spiritual presence of the ancestors is not abstract but intimate, specific, and active. They are not gods, but neither are they gone. They are family, elevated, awakened, and always near. One of the most common ways the ancestors communicate is through dreams. In African spirituality, dreams are not random images of the subconscious but are often viewed as sacred channels through which the spirit world speaks. Ancestral figures may appear to warn, encourage, or advise. A dream of a deceased elder may come before a major decision, offering insight or caution. Sometimes the dreams are direct, a voice, a message, a gesture. Other times they are symbolic, a path, a river, a burning fire, a baby crying. Elders and diviners are often called upon to interpret such dreams, decoding the messages with spiritual discernment passed down through generations. Beyond dreams. Signs and omens in the physical world are also believed to carry ancestral messages. An unexpected animal sighting, a sudden wind, a broken object, these may all be read as communications from the spirit world. In moments of silence, intuition, or sudden clarity, many believe it is the voice of the ancestors speaking gently from beyond. Their role is not to control, but to guide, nudging the living toward balance, harmony, and righteousness. But the role of ancestors is not only gentle or protective, it can also be corrective. When people stray from their duties, neglect their traditions, or commit moral wrongs, the ancestors may respond. This response is not vengeance but spiritual discipline. Misfortune, illness, or persistent bad luck is sometimes interpreted as a sign of ancestral displeasure. In such cases, rituals of reconciliation are performed, offerings are made, apologies are spoken, and harmony is sought. This dynamic teaches that morality is not enforced only by human law, but by a higher, spiritual accountability. Ancestors are not indifferent observers. They care deeply about the legacy of the family and the integrity of its members. Famine, or colonial resistance, many leaders invoked ancestral courage to rally their people. The ancestors became symbols of endurance, resilience, and collective identity. Their presence reminded the living that they were never alone, that they carried within them the strength of countless generations. Even today, in urban centers or far-off diasporas, this belief persists. Many African descendants, whether in Lagos or London, Kinshasa or Chicago, speak of feeling a presence, a grandmother's voice, a father's hand, a tribal elder's wisdom guiding them through life's storms. Ultimately, the spiritual role of the ancestors in African traditional religions is about connection, between past and present, between human and divine, between seen and unseen. They are not relics to be admired from afar, but living spirits woven into the daily fabric of life. They whisper in dreams, walk beside us in silence, and carry our names into eternity. To honor them is to acknowledge the sacred depth of existence. To ignore them is to walk blindly, deaf to the voices that know us best. Through their presence, we are reminded that we are not the beginning of the story, nor its end, but its continuation, shaped and guided by those who came before. In African traditional religions, rituals are the sacred language through which the living commune with the spirit world. They serve not only as formal acts of reverence, but also as spiritual bridges that maintain harmony between the physical and spiritual realms. Among the most meaningful and widespread rituals are those dedicated to honoring the ancestors. These practices, deeply rooted in culture, history, and cosmology, vary across ethnic groups and regions, yet they share one essential aim: to acknowledge the continued presence, influence, and guidance of the ancestors, and to reaffirm the living's responsibility to uphold the sacred lineage they inherited. The foundation of any ancestral ritual is communication. While ancestors may speak through dreams or signs, it is through ritual that the living initiate direct dialogue. One of the most recognizable and powerful forms of this communication is libation, a ritual pouring of liquid, usually water, palm wine, or gin, onto the ground. As the liquid is poured, words are spoken, often in prayer or song, calling the names of departed elders, recounting their virtues, and inviting their presence. The ground itself, which symbolically connects the earth to the underworld and spirit realm, becomes the vessel through which the message is delivered. In some communities, libation is performed daily, in others, it marks special occasions such as births, marriages, funerals, harvests, or crises. Another common and central ritual is the offering of food and drink to the ancestors. These are not meals for physical consumption, but spiritual gifts. A portion of a family meal may be set aside on a special plate, placed on an ancestral altar, or laid at a sacred tree or shrine. The belief is that, although the ancestors no longer eat in the physical sense, the spiritual essence of the offering nourishes their presence. It is a way of saying, "We have not forgotten you. You are still part of our table." These offerings are often accompanied by prayers, gestures of humility such as bowing or kneeling, and sometimes symbolic acts such as burning incense or lighting candles. Among many groups, particularly in West Africa, elaborate ancestral festivals are held to publicly honor and celebrate the spirits of the departed. These events, which can last several days, combine dance, music, drumming, masquerades, storytelling, and sacrifice. In the Yoruba tradition, for example, the Egungun festival is a vibrant and deeply spiritual celebration in which masked dancers are believed to be temporarily possessed by ancestral spirits. The community gathers to witness these spirits perform, speak, and interact with the living. These moments are not mere theater, they are sacred encounters. Individuals who are seen as spiritually attuned and capable of interpreting the will of the ancestors. Through rites such as Ifa divination, Yoruba, Afa, U, or bones and shells reading, Zulu and other Southern African traditions, messages are sought and delivered. These rituals are highly structured, involving chants, coded language, and symbolic tools. The diviner becomes a spiritual conduit, and the process allows families to ask questions, receive ancestral approval, or seek resolution for illness, misfortune, or family conflict. In many communities, ancestral rituals mark the rhythm of life itself. When a child is born, the ancestors are invoked to bless and protect the new life. The child may be named after an ancestor, believed to carry the spirit or destiny of that person. In coming-of-age ceremonies, the presence of the ancestors is requested to initiate and guide the youth into maturity. In marriage, the ancestors of both families are called upon to bless the union and ensure fertility and harmony. At death, elaborate funeral rites ensure that the spirit of the deceased is properly guided into the ancestral realm and not left wandering or restless. These rituals are not uniform, they vary from village to village, tribe to tribe, but their shared spiritual purpose reflects the African belief in reciprocity between the living and the dead. Just as the ancestors protect and guide the living must remember, honor, and serve the ancestors. Neglecting this duty is not simply a cultural oversight, it is a spiritual imbalance. In many traditions, misfortunes such as illness, infertility, conflict, or economic hardship are interpreted as signs of ancestral displeasure or neglect. To correct this, rituals of atonement or reconciliation are performed, often involving confession, sacrifice, or the restoration of broken traditions. Sacrifice, though often misunderstood outside of its cultural context, holds deep spiritual meaning in ancestral rituals. It may involve the offering of animals such as chickens, goats, or sheep, especially during major ceremonies or when making a solemn plea. The animal is treated with respect, and its life is given as a sacred exchange, a gesture of humility and sincerity. The blood is offered to the ancestors, while the meat is typically shared among family and community. In this act, the ancestors are honored, and communal bonds are strengthened. In African traditional religion, ritual is not performance, it is participation. It is not merely about remembering the past, but actively engaging with a living spiritual reality. The ancestors are not gone, they are watching, listening, waiting. And through ritual, their descendants affirm, "We still belong to you, and you still belong to us." These acts, whether grand or small, public or private, serve as daily affirmations of spiritual identity. They remind people where they come from and whose shoulders they stand on. In a world where modern life often pulls individuals away from tradition and ancestral consciousness, these rituals anchor the soul. They call the living back into alignment, with history, with family, and with the sacred. In African traditional religions, the relationship between the living and the ancestors is not a symbolic one. but a real and dynamic bond rooted in responsibility and reciprocity. To honor one's ancestors is to maintain spiritual balance, to ensure peace within the family line, and to live in alignment with the sacred order of the universe. Conversely, to forget, neglect, or disrespect the ancestors is to disrupt that sacred balance. It is not merely an emotional loss or a cultural omission, it is a spiritual breach with profound consequences. In the traditional worldview, such neglect can invite misfortune, illness, disharmony, and even spiritual death. The ancestors, once cherished and revered, may become restless, offended, or distant, withholding their protection or sending warnings in the form of suffering. One of the most widely acknowledged consequences of ancestral neglect is spiritual disconnection. In many African cultures, the ancestors are believed to serve as mediators between the world of the living and the divine. They are the bridge through which blessings flow and through which the soul finds orientation. Without that bridge, a person becomes spiritually unanchored, vulnerable to negative forces, confusion, and a sense of purposelessness. Life may begin to feel directionless, haunted by unseen forces, burdened by bad luck, or marred by inner emptiness. In this context, even success may feel hollow, for it lacks ancestral approval. It is said that a tree cut off from its roots may still stand for a time, but it will surely wither. Families and communities that forget their ancestors may also experience collective misfortunes. Illness that does not respond to treatment, repeated accidents, infertility, recurring family conflict, and inexplicable losses are often interpreted as signs that the ancestors are displeased or absent. These are not seen as random tragedies but as spiritual symptoms of a broken bond. Elders and diviners are then consulted to identify which rituals were neglected, which taboos were broken, or which ancestor has been forgotten. In many cases, it is discovered that someone in the lineage was not properly buried, or their name has not been mentioned in years, or an important ritual was skipped. The correction often requires not only ritual offerings but deep personal repentance and a recommitment to ancestral remembrance. In traditional African thought, death does not sever social ties, it transforms them. When someone dies, they are expected to transition into the ancestral realm, but that passage must be assisted and recognized. If proper funeral rites are not conducted, the soul may remain restless, caught between worlds. Such a spirit becomes what is often referred to as a wandering ghost, a presence that may disturb the living through dreams, noises, sickness, or mental unrest. The cause is not malicious intent but spiritual confusion or rejection. The dead, like the living, desire to be seen, acknowledged, and included. When they are forgotten, they may cry out, not in anger, but in longing. Another consequence of forgetting the ancestors is the loss of moral and cultural identity. In African traditional religions, the ancestors are not only spiritual beings, they are keepers of tradition, ethics, and wisdom. They embody the values that shape the community: respect for elders, honesty, humility, courage, unity, and responsibility. When their memory fades, those values begin to erode. Younger generations may grow up disconnected from their roots, unaware of the stories, teachings, and sacrifices that shaped their lineage. Cultural amnesia sets in. People begin to define themselves by external, borrowed standards rather than the spiritual wealth of their ancestry. This is not just a psychological loss, it is a weakening of the soul's foundation. In a more mystical sense, neglecting the ancestors may block blessings meant for the family or individual. In many traditions, ancestors are seen as the custodians of destiny. They carry the spiritual blueprint of the family line and hold keys to prosperity, fertility, protection, and healing. When honored, they intercede and ensure that their descendants receive what is rightfully theirs. When ignored, they may withhold their support, not as punishment, but as a reflection of spiritual imbalance. The blessings remain suspended, waiting for the ancestral link to be restored. Just as water cannot flow through a broken pipe, so too the blessings cannot reach a soul disconnected from its lineage. For some, especially those living in urban centers or diasporic communities, forgetting the ancestors may come not through malice but through modern distractions and cultural dislocation. Colonization, migration, and globalization have pulled many people away from their traditional practices. In many cases, younger generations are not taught the names, histories, or rituals of their ancestors. The shrines are removed. The songs are forgotten. The languages are lost. And with them, the intimate relationship with the ancestral realm fades. This spiritual orphanhood, though often invisible, can manifest in a deep existential crisis, a hunger for belonging, for meaning, for a sense of spiritual home. Fortunately, African spirituality teaches that the ancestors are forgiving and patient. They do not require perfection, but sincerity. Even if generations have passed in silence, a single act of remembrance can reopen the channel. A whispered name, a poured libation, a heartfelt prayer, a reawakened ritual, these are all acts of return. And when the ancestors are remembered again, they often respond swiftly, with dreams, signs, and a quiet but profound shift in the atmosphere. The curse lifts. The path clears. The heart softens. Harmony returns. In this sense, the ancestors are not rigid judges, but loving elders who wait for their children to come home. The consequences of forgetting the ancestors serve as a sacred reminder, that we are not alone, that our lives are woven into a tapestry of souls who came before us. And that we carry both their legacy and their longing. To remember them is to remember ourselves, not just as individuals, but as sacred continuations of a story much older than our own. And in doing so, we become part of something deeper, wiser, and more eternal. In the framework of African traditional religions, ancestors are more than sacred spirits to be honored during rituals and festivals. They are enduring moral guides, intimately woven into the everyday experiences of the living. They are present not only in moments of prayer or sacrifice, but also in the choices people make, the values they uphold, and the ways they navigate life's challenges. For many African communities, to live a righteous life is to live in a way that honors one's ancestors, reflects their virtues, and fulfills their expectations. In this sense, ancestral spirituality is not confined to temples, altars, or ceremonial grounds, it is lived daily, silently, and with deep intentionality. The first and perhaps most central way ancestors act as moral guides is through conscience. In traditional belief, the voice of the ancestors speaks within the individual as an inner knowing, a quiet but firm presence that nudges a person toward what is right and warns against wrongdoing. This voice is often strongest in moments of ethical dilemma. A person may hear it in their heart when tempted to lie, cheat, steal, or cause harm. It may come as a sense of unease, a restless dream, or an inexplicable resistance to an unwise action. This is not merely psychological discomfort, it is the spiritual whisper of one's lineage saying, this is not the path we walked. This is not who we are. In this way, the ancestral presence serves as a living moral compass, especially for those who have grown up hearing stories of their forebears. These stories, passed down orally through generations, carry not just memories but moral instruction. They recount how an ancestor faced injustice with courage, how a grandmother showed kindness in times of famine, how a great-uncle gave shelter to a stranger or upheld the truth even when it cost him greatly. These narratives become part of a child's identity, shaping their understanding of what it means to be honorable, generous, disciplined, or loyal. The ancestors are remembered not as perfect beings, but as real people who struggled, learned, and chose virtue over vice. Among many African societies, the fear of bringing shame to the ancestors is a powerful deterrent against immoral behavior. The belief that the ancestors are always watching creates a sense of accountability that is deeper than societal laws or external judgment. It is said that to steal, to betray, or to act with cruelty is not only to offend the living, it is to insult the ancestors who laid the foundation of one's life. This awareness encourages ethical restraint. especially in private moments when no one else is watching. It cultivates integrity that is not rooted in fear of punishment but in love and reverence for those who came before. The ancestral influence also manifests in community responsibility and mutual care. In many traditional contexts, the moral universe is not centered on the individual but on the extended family and clan. One person's actions reflect on the entire lineage. Therefore, decisions are often made with the awareness that one is carrying the name, reputation, and spiritual weight of their ancestors. This fosters humility, collective thinking, and a deep sense of duty. Helping others, resolving conflicts, showing hospitality, and contributing to communal well-being are seen as ways of honoring the ancestors, because these were the values they upheld. In this way, morality is not abstract, it is grounded in daily interactions and relationships. Another way ancestors guide moral behavior is through spiritual warnings and corrections. When a person strays from the moral path, perhaps through greed, betrayal, or arrogance, the ancestors may intervene, not to destroy but to correct. This intervention may come in the form of persistent dreams, illness, bad fortune, or the loss of peace. It is not viewed as a curse, but as a form of discipline. Similar to how a parent chastises a beloved child. The person is then called to reflect, to confess, to seek guidance from elders or diviners, and to return to the ways of the ancestors. When the correction is heeded, balance is restored. The ancestors, though firm, are ultimately forgiving, provided the lesson is learned and the heart is sincere. The presence of ancestors also strengthens moral endurance in hardship. In times of suffering, people often draw strength from the memory of those who endured before them. A widow facing loneliness remembers her grandmother who lived through war and famine. A young man tempted by corruption recalls his grandfather's refusal to take a bribe, even in poverty. These memories become moral anchors. They remind the living that they are part of a resilient chain, that they carry within them the spiritual DNA of perseverance, wisdom, and dignity. This sense of continuity inspires courage, not just to survive, but to do so with honor. In many African homes, children are taught early that their actions can please or displease the ancestors. Parents may say, "Do not lie, your ancestors are listening," or, "Help the poor, your grandmother did so, and she is watching you." These teachings, though simple, plant seeds of moral consciousness that bloom over a lifetime. The child grows up knowing that they are never alone, that their life is part of a greater moral story. As they age, they begin to see themselves not just as receivers of ancestral wisdom, but as future ancestors themselves, called to live in such a way that they, too, will be remembered with pride and reverence. This awareness gives rise to a moral vision that transcends the self. In African traditional religion, life is not about personal gain alone. It is about legacy. It is about leaving behind a name that will be spoken with joy, not shame. A person may ask themselves, "When I die, what will my grandchildren say of me? Will they pour libation in my name? Will I be a source of blessings or restlessness?" These questions are not morbid, they are deeply life-affirming. They encourage a person to live with discipline, generosity, humility, and faithfulness, not only for their own sake but for the generations to come. Thus, the ancestors are not distant relics of the past. They are ethical companions, silently walking beside the living, nudging them toward virtue, reminding them of who they are and what they must become. In the everyday decisions of life, in marriage, parenting, work, conflict, and community service, the moral voice of the ancestors is present. To ignore that voice is to drift into confusion, to heed it is to walk with clarity and purpose. In the end, to live a moral life in the context of African traditional religion is not merely to follow rules. It is to live in harmony with the sacred lineage, to honor those who came before, and to become someone worthy of being remembered. It is to carry the flame of the ancestors with dignity, and in doing so, to pass it on, bright, steady, and strong, to those who come after. In the sacred worldview of African traditional religions, life is not a solitary journey but a sacred continuum that stretches from the beginning of time to the present moment and beyond. The ancestors, far from being forgotten figures of a distant past, are living forces, guiding, witnessing, blessing, and sometimes correcting their descendants. They are the pillars of spiritual grounding, the invisible roots from which the tree of life draws nourishment. To honor them is not a mere ritual obligation, it is a profound spiritual orientation. It is a way of remembering who we are, where we come from, and what our purpose is in this world. Throughout this lecture, we have explored the multifaceted relationship between the living and the ancestors. We began by understanding who the ancestors are, not as abstract spirits, but as real people who once walked this earth, who lived, loved, struggled, and died, and who now dwell in the sacred realm of spirit. Their identity is not erased by death, it is transformed. They remain active, conscious, and deeply involved in the affairs of the living. They are consulted in times of crisis, celebrated in times of joy, and invoked during rites of passage. They are the spiritual backbone of the family and the community. We then looked at the ways the living actively honor their ancestors, through rituals, offerings, prayers, songs, storytelling, and the maintenance of shrines. These are not superstitions, they are expressions of relational fidelity. They affirm that life is circular, not linear, that death is not an end, but a transition. The libation poured, the meal shared in memory, the name spoken with reverence, each of these acts deepens the bond between the living and the departed, creating a bridge across generations and realms. In honoring the ancestors, people align themselves with the wisdom, strength, and protection of those who paved the path before them. We also explored the spiritual consequences of forgetting the ancestors. This is not simply a cultural loss, it is a spiritual rupture. When the ancestors are forgotten, neglected, or dishonored, the spiritual order is disturbed. Misfortunes may arise, not out of vengeance, but out of imbalance. A soul disconnected from its lineage is like a branch severed from its root, fragile, dry, and directionless. The forgotten ancestors do not vanish, they linger. They may call out in dreams, in illness, in unease. But their desire is not to punish, it is to be remembered, to be included, to be acknowledged. And the beauty of African spirituality is that the way back is always open. A simple act of remembrance can restore what was broken. Most importantly, we saw how the ancestors function as moral guides in daily life. They are not passive spirits, they are active voices of conscience. They live in the memory of values, in the stories of sacrifice and honor, in the quiet inner nudges that guide a person toward truth and away from corruption. The awareness that one is being watched not only by society but by generations past fosters a deeper sense of accountability. To act ethically is to act in a way that would make one's ancestors proud. And this ethical orientation is not just for personal virtue, it is a preparation for legacy. For one day, each person will become an ancestor. The question is not whether they will be remembered, but how. This ancestral consciousness is deeply grounding. In a world that often encourages people to sever ties with tradition, to pursue isolated success, or to define themselves in individualistic terms, the African perspective offers something radically different. It says, you belong. You are part of a living story. You did not arrive here by accident. Your life is the result of prayers whispered by those who came before you. Their blood runs in your veins. Their wisdom breathes through your dreams. And they are not gone, they are walking beside you, waiting to be honored, waiting to guide you. To honor the ancestors is, therefore, to resist spiritual amnesia. It is to reclaim memory in a time of forgetfulness. It is to live not just for oneself, but for one's lineage. It is to see one's daily choices as ripples in a river that flows far beyond a single lifetime. And it is to understand that spiritual power comes not only from the sky above or the earth below, but from the hearts of those who lived with love, endured with courage, And now offer their presence in silence. In the end, ancestral spirituality is not a backward gaze, it is a forward path. It invites us to ask, not only, who were my ancestors? But also, what kind of ancestor will I become? Will we live in a way that our descendants will remember us with gratitude? Will we uphold the values that hold communities together, respect, courage, humility, generosity, and truth? Will we carry the legacy with care, and pass it on with honor? When we do not only preserve tradition, we participate in the sacred dance of life, death, and eternal connection. We walk not alone, but in the footsteps of giants. We speak not alone, but with voices that echo through centuries. We live not only for ourselves, but as living vessels of those who dreamed, hoped, and prayed us into being. So let us remember. Let us pour the libation. Let us tell the stories. Let us walk in dignity. For to honor the ancestors is to remain spiritually grounded, and to be spiritually grounded is to live fully, deeply, and eternally connected to the sacred pulse of existence.